Dan, I'm very happy to be here with you today. You're the head of standards and insights at B-Lab. So you're obviously, and you're the father, so to speak, of IBM. We're going to start with the basics.
Yeah.
What is a business model according to you? Not even impact business model, but just a business model. Your definition of a business model.
I think where I would actually start is with a distinction within the assessment between how we differentiate between business models and the other aspects of how we measure performance. And so within the B-Impact assessment, we talk about different impact areas, which begins with governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. And then within that, we separate what we consider operations of a business and business models. And so before we talk about the impact side of things, the operations is essentially what does the day-to-day of a business actually look like? The idea of a business model, that then we're going to be able to add on the concept of impact, is really about the design of the business.
Today, everybody talks about impact. All the investors are impact driven. All the companies want to have a positive impact. So what is your definition of impact?
I would really just simply say it's about positive change. And so it's a change. So something is a certain baseline, and then there's something different that occurs afterwards. And ultimately, it's a change for the benefit. So some good that comes out of it.
Wonderful. So can you tell us about the history of impact business model in the business B-Impact assessment, in the story of B Corp? When were they created, added to the questionnaire?
They were originally referred to as social enterprise models. And so rather than an IBM, it was SEM. And the whole idea at the beginning was we were always developing a set of indicators that would be able to assess a company's performance. There needed to be this aspect of operational performance, which is again getting at day-to-day aspects of how a company is having an impact, which is really thinking about things like, are you providing benefits to your employees? If you're in an office, you're probably printing things out. Are you recycling your waste? Really like basic things that are about ultimately good, positive performance, but really aren't getting at the big picture of what a business is actually about. What ultimately was pretty apparent was there's a lot of things that go beyond those individual day-to-day things. And most frequently, those are the types of organizations that have historically identified themselves as something like a social enterprise, right? Not just a regular business who's trying to do something good, but really baking it into their design of their business and how they identify themselves. And so from the beginning, that was sort of a core part of what we saw as how we should assess and identify what it actually means to be a B Corp.
So maybe that's where we can talk about the key characteristics of IBM in the BIA. I think there are 5 characteristics that maybe you can comment. An IBM must be, impact business model must be specific, material, verifiable, lasting, and extraordinary, which is my favorite.
It's a special word, isn't it? So the overarching ideas of those principles was really designed to help us differentiate what is the purpose of an impact business model. And so I should begin with actually just more specifically saying, what is an IBM? Which is ultimately how a company has designed their business in a way to produce a positive impact. Examples are usually pretty helpful. And so I think the simplest example of what you can imagine an IBM to be is, again, to distinguish between the day-to-day operations of a business, a company who has designed a product or service that is itself inherently beneficial. An education company, for instance, has an impact business model in the sense that they exist to deliver a product that is ultimately about educating people, that we consider the idea of education to be an inherent positive good. There's always the need for us to be able to sort of go a level deeper and distinguish between what a company might say they think is an impact business model and what ultimately is able to meet objective, independent criteria from an organization like B-Lab when we're certifying a company to really confirm and stand behind, yes, this is in fact something that we want to label an impact business model. So that's where those principles have really come from. And the intent of them, if we sort of work them through individually, is really intended to be able to serve as that differentiation factor. The first one, and actually if you can probably sort of walk me through each one. Where did you start for the first one?
Specific.
Specific. So the idea there is ultimately there needs to be a clear identification of what the actual intended and hopefully achieved outcome is for a particular business model. This is not something that is a lofty conversation about how a company is acting with purpose in a really broad way. What we're trying to do is making sure that there is a specific identifiable characteristic of a business model that ultimately falls within these categories.
Okay, second is material.
Material. So that's ultimately getting at the degree of possible impact that can be achieved. Again, examples are usually helpful. You could actually imagine a company that puts a paragraph on the label of their product that could be a very informational paragraph on the label of that product, saying that they're achieving an educational outcome. They are, to a degree, informing their customers about something. That's not something that we would identify as material enough to ultimately be an impact business model, like, for instance, a company that might be producing textbooks. And so that's the materiality idea of getting at a distinction between ultimately the degree and substance of what's occurring.
Verifiable.
A company's got to be able to prove what they're doing. And so they're frequently, again, in the spirit of being an independent, objective standard that is about standing behind an individual company and what their impact is, there ultimately needs to be the ability to prove what is actually occurring. And so it's important to just specify that this is, again, something that's not just talk on the part of a company, but that they are able to not only show, ideally, demonstration that these things are actually being produced, but ultimately that they're able to demonstrate that there is a positive outcome that's coming from it as well.
Lasting.
Lasting. This is also something that just happens sort of on a one-off basis. The idea of a business model, not let alone an impact business model, is ultimately that there's something core to this that is durable, right? Businesses don't change their business model from one day to another. The idea of being lasting is itself a demonstration that this is truly baked into the design of the company. Most likely it's something that's existed there historically and will presumably exist on an ongoing basis. I think we can probably talk about this a little bit further. That is not to say that it's not possible to develop and evolve business models over time, but it's still important to at least acknowledge that this is something that you don't just do for a day. That when you're developing a business model, you're creating something that is quite powerful and lasting and long-term.
And it is embedded in the business too, right?
Exactly.
Because that's the point. The point
That's
is
right.
The more you grow, the more the positive impact grows as well. So because it's embedded in what you do. Which
That's
is
absolutely
the
right.
key aspect to me in B Corp.
And so using that example of an education company, the company that spends a day going out and providing volunteer service to a local school, again, might be doing something that's very positive, but that's not lasting. That's not something that they're doing every day, and it's not baked into the design of their business.
Okay, extraordinary, last but not least.
Your favorite. Impact business models are rare, and we want to actually be quite clear about the difficulty of developing an impact business model. That's not to say that we probably think all businesses should be developing them, but we do want to be clear about the fact that this is something that not every business, if you look out into the world, already has them. They are rare, they are special, they take work, and ultimately they're actually quite difficult to have and achieve and build over time.